On a sunset evening in the third year, I became engaged to Andrew Liu. Weibo exploded. The trending topic shot to the top: Andrew Liu and Sophie Su kissing in a garage, accompanied by blazing red viral tags. The man in the video was my fiancé. Just a few hours earlier, he had still reminded me that the weather had turned cold and told me to remember to put on an extra layer. At that time, I had just finished an interview after wrapping up filming for Phoenix 9 Heavens. I was still wearing the high-end gown sponsored by the brand. The reporters swarmed like sharks that had caught the scent of blood, sealing off every exit. My manager tried to pull me away, but I gently freed my hand from hers. Dozens of cameras immediately pointed straight at me, flashes exploding so brightly it felt like daytime. I lightly brushed aside the diamond tassel by my ear, faced the CCTV camera, and gave a perfectly standard smile. As for Andrew Liu's private life, I said, tilting my head slightly, my eyes calm and unruffled. I have no right to interfere, nor do I have any interest. The scene instantly filled with sharp gasps of breath. As for the engagement between Andrew Liu and me, I continued, I took out of my wallet the platinum ring he had once knelt down to give me and gently placed it on the interview table beside me. From this moment on, it is officially null and void. The live stream screen was immediately flooded with waves of rapidly scrolling comments. At the same time, in the CEO's office on the top floor of the Liu Group, Andrew Liu stared fixedly at the screen. The moment he saw me set the ring down, he suddenly kicked the live stream equipment hard. The screen slammed to the ground, sparks flying. The Qinglong Awards matter has already been handled, someone said. Your nomination has been withdrawn. The Best Actress award will be given to Sophie Su. Andrew Liu shoved a stack of documents toward me. A silver lighter struck the crystal ashtray with a sharp, grating sound. I stared at the wedding ring on his ring finger, identical to the one I had worn. My throat tightened. I took a sip of champagne and forced it down, bitterness surging to the corners of my eyes. My phone vibrated inside my handbag. When I stood up, I ran into Sophie Su at the revolving door. She was wearing the Victorian-era blue diamond necklace Andrew Liu had once purchased at auction at Christie's, the very piece I had glanced at twice before during a previous celebration banquet. Please don't misunderstand, she said softly. Andrew was just taking the opportunity to discuss investment for a new film. As she spoke, she raised her hand to gently stroke the pendant, the cold diamond flashing against her collarbone. I slipped past her and walked straight out onto the balcony. My brother had already called 3 times across continents. Dad's fever has flared up again. He'll be back in the country next week, his voice lowered. He never approved of you and Andrew in the first place. Now he's furious. He might even come see you himself. I looked down at the line of Liu family taillights below and cut him off. I'm preparing to break up with Andrew Liu. Tell Dad to give me 2 more weeks to deal with the aftermath of the broken engagement. This time, I won't soften my heart again. When I pushed open the heavy oak door of the CEO's office once more, Sophie Su was sitting at the corner of Andrew Liu's desk, the exact spot where I used to place his coffee whenever he handled documents. Her legs were gently swinging, the tip of her high heel lightly brushing against his suit pants. Stella, she looked up, her tone perfectly measured. Thank you for letting me have the Best Actress award at the Qinglong Awards. This award is very important to me. I heard no gratitude in her words at all, only unmistakable self-satisfaction. Andrew Liu lifted his head from the stack of documents, reached out and rubbed the top of her head, his indulgent gaze blatant and undisguised. There's nothing to thank her for, he said. It's just an award. You were better than her to begin with. The moment he finished speaking, a sentence suddenly echoed in my ears. Something my father had said 3 years ago when he was sitting in his study. That man is not a good person. Back then, I didn't understand and only thought my father was old-fashioned. Now I finally understood. A man who cannot decisively sever ties with other women is, deep down, never worthy of trust. To allow another woman to humiliate you and hurt you is not because he doesn't love you enough, but because he doesn't love you at all. Maybe my father had seen through it long ago. He was just afraid I wouldn't be able to bear it, so he never said it out loud. My heart felt as if it were being slowly tightened by a thin cord, pain seeping in bit by bit. I forced down the lump in my throat, lifted my head, and looked straight into Andrew Liu's eyes. "This award," I said, "is recognition for my 7 years in the industry and the 23 films I've made." I could hear my own voice trembling, yet every word rang out with startling clarity. "On what grounds do you make me give it up?" Andrew Liu finally set his pen down. His cold gaze swept over me, and when he spoke, his voice carried not a trace of warmth. "Do you want to withdraw on your own, or should I have someone remove your name from the nomination list?" My hand closed around the doorknob. I turned back and looked at the room one last time. Andrew Liu was still sitting there with Sophie Su leaning close beside him, the two of them whispering about something. They looked so intimate, like a painting that could not tolerate the presence of a third person. From the first look of acknowledgement he gave me during that audition, 8 years ago, to last year when he personally handed me the trophy for Most Commercially Valuable Actress of the Year, Andrew Liu had been present through almost every rise and fall of my career. No one understood better than he did that this Qinglong trophy was not just a title to me, but the strongest rebuttal to those who had always doubted my acting ability. And yet now, watching him casually take the recognition that should have belonged to me and lightly hand it to someone else, I suddenly felt that perhaps the trophy no longer mattered that much after all. Not because the award had lost its value, but because I abruptly realized that the man who once kept me awake all night waiting for news, the man whose single word of praise could make me excited for an entire night, no longer held even the slightest value in my heart. I stood at the door for too long, so long that Andrew Liu finally looked up. His gaze was cold and distant. "Is there anything else?" I gently shook my head. The corner of my lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. I softly closed the door, shutting out all the sounds from inside. Walking down the hallway, I called my manager, Linda Yang. "Linda, help me post a statement." "A statement about what?" "A statement withdrawing from the Best Actress competition at this year's Qinglong Awards." There was a moment of silence on the other end before Linda's voice rose in anxious disbelief. "Stella, do you know what you're saying? We've been preparing for this award for over a year. All the public opinion, the connections with the judging panel, everything is already in place. We're just waiting for the final moment." To fit this role, I had turned down all commercial activities for half a year, gone deep into remote mountain areas, experienced life there for 2 full months, and had even narrowly avoided an accident in the mountains. By the time I returned to my lounge and started packing up my personal belongings, Andrew Liu pushed the door open and walked in. Seeing me packing, his brows knit slightly, as if he hadn't expected me to be this calm and decisive. "Don't take this too far, Stella," he said, his tone softening, carrying that familiar hint of patience, as if he were coaxing a stubborn child. "The Hollywood co-production the company is investing in next year, the female lead role will be yours, and it's that type of role. To ruthlessly take away the thing I cherished most, then casually toss out another reward that sounded sweet, as if it were compensation. Ever since I signed with the company and began receiving his support, Andrew Liu had always used this method to make me willingly give up a top-tier luxury brand endorsement, a fixed slot on an S-class television program, and now the Best Actress trophy I had been longing for all these years. If she wants us to break up, then what?" I once asked him that during a fierce argument, tears streaming down my face. Back then, Andrew Liu only let out a scornful laugh, as if I were saying something utterly absurd. She wouldn't. Until this very moment, until I saw the photo Sophie Su had just posted, which looked like a casual makeup share but was actually showing off the diamond ring on her ring finger. Until I witnessed him allowing, even indulging her again and again as she crossed boundaries, taking everything that should have belonged to me, I suddenly woke up. Yes, she wouldn't. Not because he didn't want to, but because my weight in his heart was as light as dust, not worth even the slightest friction between him and Sophie Su on my behalf. When I left the CEO's office at the Liu Group headquarters, a decorative display in the hallway suddenly went out of control and collapsed, crashing down on both Sophie Su and me at the same time. Amid the shattering glass, I pressed my hand against my arm where blood was seeping out. while Sophie Sue's ankle had only turned slightly red. Hearing the noise, Andrew Liu rushed out. But at the corner he didn't hesitate for even a second before running straight towards Sophie Sue. "Can you stand?" He knelt on one knee to check her ankle. His white dress shirt was smeared with my blood. I braced myself against the wall, struggling to stand, my ankle twisted and throbbing with sharp pain. Sophie Sue timidly pointed in my direction. "Stella is bleeding too." Andrew Liu didn't even turn his head. He tossed his car keys at my feet. "Go to the clinic yourself." He scooped Sophie Sue up in his arms, the hem of his suit brushing past and scraping my wound as he passed. "Don't move," he said, lowering his head to brush dust from her forehead. "Your ankle's swollen. You need ice right away." As I bent down to pick up the keys, I heard his softened voice coaxing her. "Hold on tight. The elevator's here." The man who once shielded me when props went out of control on set was now carrying another woman away in a hurry, not even noticing me staggering as I struggled to stand. The building security rushed over to support me and suddenly cried out in alarm. "Miss Lin, your arm, you're bleeding." I looked at the elevator doors that had already closed, took the gauze, and pressed it against my wound. "It's okay. I'm fine." So it wasn't that he didn't know how to cherish someone. It was just that he no longer cherished me. Sophie Sue was the cinnabar mark in Andrew Liu's heart. In the first year after our engagement, I once discovered an old USB drive in his safe. There was only a single video on it. Sophie Sue at 22, crowned Best Actress, blowing a kiss toward the camera. In the corner of the frame, a young Andrew Liu raised a glass of champagne, smiling as he looked at her. No one would have imagined that the female star who had dominated the screen for 3 consecutive years would suddenly marry a Macau casino tycoon, then retire without a word of farewell. That night, I copied the video onto my phone and sat on the balcony until dawn. When Andrew Liu discovered that I had touched his safe, it was the first time he ever lost his temper with me. Later, he pinched the bridge of his nose and apologized. Back then, when she married someone else, I almost sold off everything I had to go to the casino and take her back. Helping her return now, it's just that I'm still not reconciled. They reunited on the day Sophie Sue finalized her divorce and returned to the country. I saw business news reporting that it was Andrew Liu himself who went to the airport to pick her up. The way he shielded her as he escorted her into the car was exactly the same as 3 years earlier in Hengdian, when he protected me from the paparazzi. From that point on, Andrew Liu began pouring resources into me, from magazine covers to guest roles in Hollywood. He was always on set, watching through the monitor, saying, "The angle when you bite your lip like that is very captivating." Just like that rainy day. The first time I auditioned at his company, I only had a tiny role with 3 lines, yet I was so nervous I NG'd 7 times. Andrew Liu walked out from the monitoring room, lifted my chin and guided my face toward the window. Lowering my head and biting my lip, yes, that was the angle. That day, after filming Wrapped, the producer used the excuse of needing reshoots to lure me to the hotel. When I struggled desperately, it was Andrew Liu who led security and broke the door down to rush in. He took off his suit jacket and wrapped it around my trembling body, then turned around and grabbed the producer and threw him straight into the swimming pool. That night, he stayed awake by my side in the hospital until dawn, then spoke softly, "Stay with me. I won't let you suffer any more injustice." But now, watching Andrew Liu's back as he hurried away holding Sophie Sue, I was jolted awake. I finally realized that all along, he had been using my profile to search for the shadow of another woman. My arm, cut by shards of glass, was still wrapped in bandages. 3 days in the hospital passed, and ever since Andrew Liu carried Sophie Sue away, he had not called me even once. Occasionally, he sent a few WeChat messages, but they were all about my withdrawal from the Qinglong Awards. This morning, he suddenly broke his usual pattern and asked one question: "Is the wound deep?" Then he added that he wanted to bring Sophie Sue to visit me. When I replied that it wasn't necessary, he only sent over several new script covers and reminded me to choose carefully. On the day I was discharged, I still didn't wait for him. I asked the head nurse to help me buy a small box of steamed buns, ate them slowly in the early morning light, and only then began packing my personal belongings. During my hospital stay, My manager and assistant had taken turns caring for me. Andrew Liu had sent his assistant, Jason Chen, to deliver several kinds of imported supplements and 3S+ film scripts. I threw all of them straight into the medical trash bin in front of the nurse. My phone vibrated. He texted that he had to fly urgently to Milan, that he had already told Jason Chen to pick me up from the hospital, and told me to behave myself and wait for him at home. I swiped away the notification without replying. After being discharged, I didn't return to the old house. Instead, I went straight to the new apartment I had just purchased. When I opened the door, the luggage I had asked the housekeeper to arrange beforehand was already neatly placed in the middle of the living room. I remembered going back to Riverside Residence to pick up my things earlier. The housemaid had stood there awkwardly, wringing her apron. "You're moving out without telling Mr. Liu?" "There's no need," I replied. "He's probably busy and doesn't pay attention to trivial things like this." "You've had a hard time lately." "Thank you." On the night of the Qinglong Awards, Beijing was drizzled with light rain. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in my apartment, watching the award ceremony broadcast live on TV. On the screen, Sophie Su was linking arms with Andrew Liu, wearing the high-end Elisa gown I had once loved most, her smile radiant under the flashing lights. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. The screen flashed 3 words, Andrew Liu. "Why didn't you attend the award ceremony?" His voice lowered, carrying a hint of displeasure. "Jason said you canceled all your schedules." My brother, who was sitting across from me making tea, paused when he heard Andrew Liu's voice on speaker. "I'm busy handling personal matters," I said, still staring at Sophie Su's shy, reserved demeanor on the TV screen. "I couldn't go." "Are you sulking?" His voice turned cold. On the television, Sophie Su smiled as she answered the interview. "This award means a lot to me. I especially want to thank Andrew Liu for always supporting me." I decisively pressed the button to end the call. My brother placed a teacup in front of me. "Do you need the family to step in for the broken engagement?" "No need." I took the signed contract out of my handbag. "Everything's already been handled." Back then, to persuade my father to agree to the engagement, Andrew Liu had put a considerable amount of assets into the contract. Now, those very terms became the reason that allowed me to walk away cleanly. "If there's anything that must be said," my brother continued, picking up his car keys, "I've already scheduled a meeting with the lawyer." He had just finished a meeting in the financial district. He suddenly stopped, his gaze shifting away as if he were hiding something. "Once everything is settled, I'll take you back to Suzhou to stay for a while." On the TV, the host began announcing the Best Actress award. The camera swept over Andrew Liu. He was looking down at his phone, his expression full of irritation. I turned off the TV, removed the SIM card from my phone, and gently placed it on top of the stack of divorce documents. Until I personally went to the Liu family home to discuss the annulment with his parents, it seemed Andrew Liu still had no idea at all. In the past, if I so much as scraped my leg on set, he would immediately drop everything and rush over. Once, when I suffered heat stroke while filming in the desert, he chartered a private jet and brought a medical team overnight without hesitation. On the day I went to the Liu residence to sign the annulment papers, I even mentally prepared myself for the possibility that he might suddenly rush out to stop me. But by the time I finished signing my name and let out a self-mocking smile, I realized I had been overthinking it. Maybe this was for the best. An engagement that had never been blessed from the beginning deserved to end cleanly like this. That night, right after I left the Liu family home, my phone kept vibrating non-stop. The screen showed dozens of missed calls, from my parents, from friends in the industry, even from senior figures who had once supported me. When my brother called, I had just finished removing my makeup and was about to rest. His voice, rarely so flustered, came through the line. "Stella, have you checked Weibo? The trending topic, Andrew Liu and Sophie Su kissing in a garage, is back again, with blazing red viral tags." In the security camera footage, he was bending down and holding Sophie Su tightly in front of the car, their posture so intimate that even the creases in his shirt were clearly visible. The most liked comment read, "So what if she's a star? No matter how good her acting is, if she can't hold on to her man, she's still useless." The next day, I still attended the brand event as scheduled. I was wearing a new season haute couture outfit that the stylist had already coordinated. Unexpectedly, near the end of the event, reporters suddenly swarmed in, microphones nearly pressing against my face. My assistant reflexively tried to block them, but I gently shook my head at her. Dozens of cameras turned toward me at once, flashes firing continuously. I stood straight, smoothed the hem of my dress, and smiled calmly into the main camera. Regarding Andrew Lou's private matters, I paused slightly so every word would land clearly. I have no right, nor any interest, in getting involved. The entire venue fell silent at once. As for the engagement between Andrew Lou and me, I continued, calmly unfastening the platinum necklace he had once personally put around my neck and gently placing it onto the ceremonial tray provided by the organizers. This is where it ends. The live stream instantly exploded with comments, and the moment I turned and walked away was captured by the cameras, becoming the cover image of most news sites the very next day. It wasn't until the fourth day after everything erupted that Andrew Lou finally appeared. By then, all the hot search topics had been thoroughly taken down, and even my annulment statement had vanished from public view. He contacted me and asked to meet at the familiar Japanese restaurant we used to frequent together. I was still hesitating outside the private room when the sliding door opened from inside. He hadn't even taken off his coat yet. His tie hung loose, his briefcase placed beside him. "Stella, explain the annulment," he said, rubbing his temples, his voice clearly laced with fatigue. "Have I spoiled you too much these past few years? Or did you believe those ridiculous photos online? I already told you it was just a social function. When will you learn to be a little more sensible? You always act on impulse without considering the bigger picture." He loosened his tie further. "I told you it was a misleading camera angle. I was just helping her up." I bit down hard on my lower lip. Selfish, impulsive, thoughtless. So in his heart, I had always been nothing more than a childish fiancée who only knew how to cause trouble. I lifted my head and looked straight into his eyes. "President Liu, you're overthinking it. That was a crisis management decision made by Director William Wong himself. After all, with you and Miss Sue being rumored like that, if I, your fiancé, didn't react at all, it would have been completely unreasonable. I never once mentioned the scandal between him and Sophie Sue before everything was finally brought to an end. I didn't want to waste words on pointless arguments." The tension in his expression eased slightly. He reached out as if to touch me, but I leaned aside to pour tea, deftly avoiding him. Just as his hand brushed the teapot, his phone rang. He answered, then hurriedly stood up, the sleeve of his kimono knocking over the teacup. "There's something urgent at the company. I have to leave first," he said. "I prepared a gift for you. Remember to ask Jason to pick it up." The night before I was set to leave for Suzhou with my brother, I met Linda Yang, my manager, at a small tavern beneath the company building. I wanted to ask for a long leave. Stirring the latte in my hand, I said it might be 6 months, or maybe a year. She flipped through her schedule, her hand pausing slightly. "Because of President Liu?" Outside the window, plane tree leaves rustled as they fell. I remembered that around this time last year, Andrew Liu had stood on this very street, throwing a birthday celebration for me. "My family has arranged blind dates for me," I said, lowering my eyes. I agreed. She let out a soft sigh and closed the planner. "Have you seen the script City Tower I brought you? It was written specifically for you. Let that opportunity go to someone new." I pushed the USB drive toward her. Inside was the studio's entire plan for this quarter. I've already arranged everything. But when I mentioned Andrew Lou's name, Linda's expression gradually grew serious. "I haven't told him about the blind dates yet," I said, but the words caught in my throat. Suddenly I remembered that day. He had even needed his assistant to look up the address of my new place. I gave a small laugh and shook my head. Forget it. He had never taken the initiative to care about my life anyway. Linda and I stayed at the bar until 10 at night, until the staff came over to remind us they were about to close. Only then did we realize the entire place was empty except for our table, the background music long since turned off. When we stepped outside, the early autumn wind carried a hint of chill. I instinctively tightened my coat. A few glasses of sake made my steps unsteady, Yet my mind was unusually clear. My fingertips still seemed to retain the warmth of the porcelain sake cup. I had never been good at drinking. In the past, every time there was a banquet, Andrew Liu would text, "Call me when you're done." But every time the event ended, the person waiting outside the hotel was always his assistant. Jason would always say the same thing. "Miss Lin, President Liu has an emergency international meeting. He asked me to take you home." Everything started after Sophie Sue divorced. From then on, whenever there was an event Sophie Sue attended, Andrew Liu's black Bentley would always appear on time in the parking lot. He would stand by the car smoking, looking as though he were waiting for me, yet his gaze never left Sophie Sue, who was surrounded by reporters not far away. After getting into the car, he would still courteously fasten my seatbelt, but his fingers never brushed my skin, not even once. The scent inside the car was unfamiliar, the perfume of a brand Sophie Sue endorsed. Thinking back now, those so-called chance encounters late at night were nothing more than his way of ensuring Sophie Sue could leave safely. I was merely a prop, used to conceal his true feelings. Andrew Liu appearing at my door once again genuinely surprised me. I was flying to Suzhou the next day. The living room was filled with 3 or 4 suitcases, and on the kitchen island of the open kitchen, several bags of unpacked items still lay scattered. The elevator chimed, the doors slid open, and he stepped out. When he saw the room piled with luggage, his face darkened immediately. "Why are you suspending work to go to Suzhou?" he asked. "Are you still angry with me?" For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. Just then, a gentle voice suddenly sounded inside the elevator. "Waichu, talk a little more gently." Sophie Sue stepped out and stood naturally beside him. That day, she was wearing a creamy white knitted dress, and Andrew Liu's cashmere sweater happened to be in the same tone. They looked exactly like a couple who had been carefully color-coordinated back in their school days. She smiled with a hint of coy reproach and lightly pushed his arm. "Your temper is always so hot. What girl would like a man who talks so harshly?" I looked at the two of them standing side by side and forced myself into a standard, polite smile. "I planned this trip a while ago. My family is in Suzhou, so I'm stopping by to take a short vacation." I shifted slightly to block the doorway. "The place is a mess right now. It's not convenient to invite you in." In the past, because of Andrew Liu, I gave up the chance to study abroad and stayed in Beijing. He had once told me that his villa was our home. I believed him, so I never bought any property of my own. It wasn't until my recent hospitalization that I quietly purchased this apartment. After I was discharged, he told me to move back to the villa. I refused. Andrew Liu didn't say anything, only stared at me in silence, his gaze heavy and unreadable. Sophie Sue glanced at my suitcase, then spoke sweetly. "Stella, I'm hosting a celebration party for the Qinglong Award tomorrow. I really want to invite you." She tilted her head and smiled softly. Waichu said it would be fine to just send an invitation, but I felt it would be more sincere to come personally. "You'll come, won't you?" "Sorry, I'm leaving today." I escorted the housekeeper out, closed the door, then turned back to answer Sophie Sue. No wonder she was the rising best actress. If she wanted the corners of her eyes to redden, they reddened instantly. Her eyes shimmered, pitiful and delicate, as she looked toward Andrew Liu. "Stella, are you still angry with me? Angry that I took your award? There really isn't anything between Huaichu and me. Please don't misunderstand. I had fallen into that trap before." Every time she played the weaker one, I would angrily argue back. The more pitiful she appeared, the worse my position became, small-minded, sharp, unreasonable. Andrew Liu would make me apologize every single time. I kept trying to explain myself to justify everything. Later, I learned to stay silent, letting her perform her solo act, even pretending not to see her when we met in person. I once thought that backing down would buy me peace. I was wrong. She would always appear at the moments when I was at my weakest, just like a few days ago when I was lying in the hospital bed. Andrew Liu spent the entire day picking out formal wear with her, without asking a single question about my condition. I took a step back, my voice calm. "That's not the case. You deserve the Qinglong Award. I still have a lot to work on." I then turned to Andrew Liu. "What do you think, President Liu?" Andrew Liu's expression stiffened instantly. His throat bobbed slightly. "What did you just call me?" I booked an early morning flight to Suzhou, I continued evenly. My parents are vacationing there, so I'll take the chance to relax as well. I've made a few new friends, and there's a small gathering tonight. After a few rounds of drinks, the door was pushed open again. The young women in the room immediately lit up. Lawyer Shen, you really are an honored guest. That's right, Lawyer Shen, what brings you here tonight? I was nearby meeting a client, he replied casually. I heard the Lin family is staying here as well, so I came by to say hello. Daniel Shen spoke as his gaze swept once around the room, finally landing on my face. My brother leaned close to my ear and lowered his voice. Stella, this is your blind date for today, Lawyer Shen. I lifted my head and looked at the man. He was indeed taller than Andrew Liu. He wore a black wool coat over a sharply tailored charcoal gray suit, broad-shouldered and straight-backed, with striking features and a well-balanced build. What stood out most were his long legs, perfectly outlined by his dress pants, flawless by any standard. I lowered my head and took a small sip of tea. My fingers unconsciously traced along the rim of the cup. It couldn't be, could it? Could he be the very lawyer who had helped me draft the annulment papers? The moment that thought surfaced in my mind, I suddenly realized just how ironic this situation was. Back then, I had sat in front of him, crying my eyes out, revising each clause of the annulment document line by line. And now we were meeting again as blind date prospects. Heat rushed to my ears instantly. I couldn't even taste the tea anymore. My brother, however, didn't seem to care much at all. He waved directly toward the door. Daniel, you came at just the right time. Later, could you please take my sister home? I still have a bit of business to handle and might be back late. I looked at my brother, then turned my gaze toward Daniel Shen. His eyes passed through the crowd and settled on me. After a brief hesitation, he nodded lightly. Sure. Thanks, my brother said with satisfaction, then leaned closer to me and chuckled softly. See? Compared to that Andrew Liu who changed his heart, Daniel Shen is 100 times better. If someone treats you like this, why are you still holding back for that guy? My face burned. Stop talking nonsense. How is that nonsense? He raised an eyebrow. If you miss out on someone like Daniel Shen, that would be a real waste. My phone vibrated in my bag. The screen showed an incoming call from Andrew Liu. I silenced it and slipped the phone back into my handbag. As the car stopped at a red light, his words from a few days ago suddenly echoed in my ears. I prepared a gift for you. Remember to ask Jason to deliver it. I opened my phone to check the delivery record and saw that it had already been signed for. I then dragged all of Andrew Liu's contact information into my blocked list. In fact, 3 days ago, I had already signed the annulment agreement with the Liu family. From that moment on, he and I were truly finished. Daniel Shen tapped his fingers lightly on the steering wheel, as if he wanted to say something. I had no intention of hiding it from him. When I announced the annulment to the media, I was serious. He let out a soft laugh and said, "That's good." Morning sunlight streamed through the dining room window. I slowly sipped my soy milk. The TV was automatically playing the morning entertainment news. On the screen, Andrew Liu and Sophie Su were sitting side by side in the front row of a fashion show in Milan. Because of the annulment scandal last month, the reporter's questions this time were especially sharp. Just as the host was about to change the topic, a reporter suddenly asked, after the annulment, Miss Stella Lin was rumored to have returned to Suzhou and was recently photographed strolling through Aoyuan Garden with Lawyer Shen. May I ask if the two of them are dating? My brother's hand, scooping porridge, paused slightly. In the live stream, Andrew Liu calmly adjusted his watch and gave a perfunctory answer, the familiar indifferent expression still at the corners of his lips. She's not the kind of person who would easily start a new relationship. The camera shifted to Sophie Su. Her smile was clearly strained. I gently stirred the lotus seed porridge in my bowl and, mimicking his tone from years ago, whispered softly, "And what gives you the right to think I can't start over?" I recalled that night, the night he gave me the engagement ring. I had hugged a pillow and teased Andrew Liu while sitting on the sofa. "If you ever dare to hurt me, I'll go home and marry someone who's perfectly matched to me." He pulled me into his arms, his nose brushing lightly against my collarbone. "You wouldn't dare," he said. Outside the window, the gentle calls of a local flower vendor selling orchids drifted in, stretching softly with the rhythm of the Suzhou morning breeze. At that moment, holding the celadon glazed porcelain bowl in my hands, I finally understood one thing. Not every childhood sweetheart can make it to the end. Just like the twin lotus stems in the garden, on the surface they seem to lean on each other, side by side, yet beneath the still water, their roots have long since grown in two different directions. That day, Daniel Shen didn't leave until after he had personally seen me home. Before he turned to go, I softly called out to him. "Daniel, are you free tomorrow? I'd like to invite you to see a movie." His eyes lit up with a gentle smile. "Sure. I'll pick you up tomorrow." The next morning, he appeared at the gate right on time. I still carried the fresh scent of morning dew with me. The moment I sat in the passenger seat, he handed me a thermal flask. "My mom made pear soup with rock sugar. The weather's changing, take care of your lungs." When the lights in the theater dimmed, I quietly lifted my gaze to the big screen. In the past, whenever I went to the movies with Andrew Liu, I always had to let him choose financial documentaries or industry films. He would watch while handling emails, and I would sit beside him, counting the patterns on the seats amid the popping of popcorn. When the opening music played, I instinctively turned to look. It was an art film few people knew about, one I had recommended in a review 3 years earlier. "I happened to see that you posted about it on Weibo back then," Daniel said in a low, gentle voice as he handed me the 3D glasses. "I hope you still like it." On the way out, we passed a wall of posters. He stopped in front of one, Rain Beating on Banana Leaves, the film that had earned me a Qinglong nomination. He looked at the still of me in character and said softly, "I've watched every one of your works." The sunset filtered through the glass wall, casting soft bands of light across his shoulders. The Shen family was an old established business clan in the Jiangnan region, but after finishing law school, Daniel Shen chose to open his own law firm. He was the most outstanding of his generation, and in the end, his family respected his choice. That was why he said to me, "You can keep acting. You don't need to give up what you love for anyone." When he said those words, the look in his eyes behind the lenses was gentle and sincere, completely different from the sharp, formidable lawyer my brother often described. He lightly adjusted his glasses. "Stella, I hope you always live freely and peacefully." That night, in the quiet of my room, I kept thinking about those words. I had once believed that a family like the Shens would surely want their daughter-in-law to be reserved and low profile. Yet he told me I could continue to shine under the stage lights. When I first entered the industry, I loved sharing fragments of my everyday life online, sneaking instant noodles in the makeup room when I was starving, messing up a take 20 times, and then collapsing on set, crying until my makeup blurred. Or the first time I was suspended on wires, so scared my legs went weak while I still had to pretend to be brave. Later, Andrew Liu said the fiancée of the Liu family shouldn't expose herself like that. I locked all those posts away and turned myself into the demure version he wanted. Even now, I suddenly jolted awake in bed, my heart pounding. So it turned out that many years ago, Daniel Shen had already seen the truest version of me. The garden banquet hall of the Park Hyatt Suzhou overlooked the full view of Jinji Lake. As both families sat around a round rosewood table, the servers were portioning out stewed soft-shell turtle with rock sugar. Since confirming our relationship, this was the first time both sides had formally discussed marriage. My mother leaned over and whispered to me that today's menu had been personally revised by Daniel 3 times. Mrs. Shen, dressed in a Suzhou silk gown, gently picked up a piece of honey-glazed char siu and placed it in my bowl. "Stella, you're too thin, you need to eat more." When she set down her chopsticks, a translucent jade bracelet had already appeared on my wrist. Only later did I learn that it was the heirloom token passed down to the eldest daughter-in-law of the Shen family. "Stella is even more beautiful in person than on screen," she said with a smile. "No wonder Daniel keeps every one of her films in his office." At last, the wait was over. Daniel and I lowered our heads at the same time, smiling as we drank our tea. He spoke softly to me, saying that his mother had once been a renowned Peking opera artist in the north, who married into Jiangnan for love. Old Mr. Shen had cherished her his entire life, so the whole family indulged her a little more than usual. I looked at the vivid green tea leaves floating in the cup, Bilochun, and suddenly felt that a marriage like this seemed quite beautiful. When Mr. Shen called me to sit beside him, Daniel immediately stood up and pulled out the chair for me. The old man deliberately put on a stern face. "So now you know how to protect someone, do you?" Yet his eyes were full of barely concealed joy and pride. "If this boy ever dares to make you unhappy in the future, I'll take my dragon-headed cane and knock some sense into him." I accepted the peeled fruit Mrs. Shen handed me, my eyes curving into a smile. "I'll remember that." The wedding date was set for the beginning of spring, less than 3 weeks away. I had thought the wedding menu would be chosen from standard packages, but to my surprise, Daniel Shen had long prepared a fully customized plan. When he took me to taste the dishes, he deliberately didn't bring any family members along, wanting to save the surprise for everyone. Just imagining my brother's expression when he tasted this crab meatball dish already felt amusing. I could picture it clearly. He was the biggest foodie in our family. Daniel gently drew closer, his fingertips brushing over the gold-embossed patterns on the menu. "Stella, thank you for letting me step into your life," he said softly. "Even now, everything still feels like a dream to me." It wasn't just him, I often felt the same way. It wasn't until I tasted the Wenzi tofu soup personally prepared by the head chef that I truly felt it. I was about to get married. And I also realized that it had been a long time since I last thought about Andrew Liu. I let out a long, quiet breath. It was time to say goodbye to the past. When the chef brought out a sugar sculpture modeled after my character from a film, Daniel's ears flushed red. His voice was a little awkward. "It really looks like you, Stella, so much like you." A sudden wave of emotion surged up. My eyes stung, yet I couldn't help wanting to laugh. Watching him clumsily wipe the sugar coating off the sculpture with a napkin, tears shimmered in my eyes. Daniel grew even more flustered. I took his sugar-sticky hand and smiled gently. "How can you be this adorable?" "Lawyer Shen, we've decided we'll make the wedding cake ourselves." I put on an apron and whipped fresh cream in the Western-style kitchen of the Shen family villa. I never expected that the baking skills I learned while filming would one day be used for such a special occasion. When I lifted the piping bag, Daniel gently stepped behind me and held my wrist. My arm trembled slightly, then gradually relaxed. I had learned how to grow accustomed to his closeness, how to accept someone so gentle. "I'm sorry," he said, immediately letting go and stepping back when I turned around, only to meet a fleeting look of disappointment in his eyes. I took the initiative to step forward and wrap my arms around his neck. "It's okay, we can practice more." His eyes lit up, like a child who had just been given a piece of candy. I rose onto my toes and softly placed a kiss at the corner of his lips. Just as he was about to say something, he wrapped an arm around my waist and lifted me straight onto the kitchen counter. The sweet scent of cream surrounded us. His kiss was clumsy but sincere, gradually deepening, until my brother burst into the kitchen. "Daniel Shen, Stella Lin." Daniel was reluctant to let me go and even shot my brother a glare. I hurriedly jumped down from the counter, grabbed the piping bag, and hastily squeezed decorative flowers onto the cake. Messy, crooked roses, but full of sweetness. The time I spent with Daniel Shen taught me that the right person doesn't need to come early, he just needs to come at the right time. After Andrew Liu failed to reach me 3 times in a row, he finally sensed that something was wrong. He immediately had his assistant check my schedule, only to discover that I had already stayed in Suzhou for over a month. At first, he thought I was just sulking again like before, that after a few days of Cold War, we would make up as usual. It wasn't until one late night that his father personally brought legal documents to his office in a brown leather envelope. Inside was the notarized annulment agreement. Every clause was clear and unequivocal. From this point on, both parties were free to marry, and neither would interfere in the other's life. "Ms. Lin came to the house to annul the engagement a month ago," Andrew Liu's father said, pushing the contract in front of him. "At the time, the matter between you and Sophie Su was blowing up everywhere, so I signed on your behalf." Andrew Liu stared fixedly at my signature at the bottom of the contract. Involuntarily, he recalled the auction last year. I had pointed at a jade necklace and asked him how much it was worth. He had been busy bidding on a diamond for Sophie Sue and answered casually, "Over 30 million. Now the check attached to the contract bore that exact amount, not a cent less. Late that night, he rushed to the villa that had once been our home. The fingerprint lock flashed an error message. When the building security recognized him, they handed him a cardboard box. Miss Lin said that if Mr. Liu came looking for her, we were to give this to you. Inside were all the gifts he had given me over the years, neatly packed. Each item had a label with the date it was given. On the very top was the music box from our first date. The note attached read, "It began with a flutter of emotion and ended with clarity." When he tried to contact me through mutual friends, the reply came back politely, "Stella is trying on engagement rings right now. It's not convenient for her to take the call." From the other end of the line, faintly, came the voice of a jewelry consultant. "Mr. Shen is asking whether you prefer emeralds or rubies, Miss Lin." Then a warm male voice followed gently, "We can choose both." In a bridal boutique filled with cloud-light white gowns, Andrew Liu finally called again, 5 days before my wedding. His voice was icy, as if soaked in freezing water. "Stella Lin, that annulment contract, I can treat it as if it never existed. You'd better come back to Beijing immediately." Suddenly the phone was snatched away by Sophie Sue, her voice still sweet. "Stella, Andrew hasn't been sleeping well lately. I heard you're getting married, is that true?" The phone was in Daniel Shen's hand. Hearing this, my brother immediately stepped out of the resort suite. Facing the mirror, I adjusted the pearl tiara on my head and replied indifferently, "Yes, is there anything else? I'm busy." From the other end came the sound of something falling to the floor, followed by Andrew Liu's trembling voice. "Who are you planning to marry? You're only 27. What kind of family would be willing to marry an actress?" His tone grew harsher by the second. Before my brother could lose his temper, I calmly cut in. "Yes, I'm 27, so I want to marry the person I love." "What's wrong with that, President Liu?" Daniel Shen gently took my hand and spoke into the phone. "President Liu, we're trying on wedding gowns right now." The bridal convoy had just arrived at Jinji Lake Boulevard when a black car suddenly blocked the road. Andrew Liu stepped out. Though his attire was impeccable, gloom clung to him unmistakably. The moment I saw Sophie Sue step out after him, the tightly wound nerves in my head suddenly loosened. I was sitting in the wedding car. The veil was blown violently by the wind caused by the sudden braking. Andrew Liu yanked open the car door, his eyes bloodshot. "Stella Lin, are you really doing this? Getting married after only 3 months. How well do you even know him?" Daniel Shen's escort vehicles immediately surrounded the wedding car. Sophie Sue stepped forward. She gently took hold of Andrew Liu's sleeve. "Wai Chu, don't do this anymore. Stella has already found her happiness. We should be blessing her." I truly hadn't expected Sophie Sue to follow him all the way to Suzhou. What I hadn't expected even more was that after all these years, the two of them were still entangled, never truly cutting things off. Daniel Shen stepped forward. It was the first time I had seen such sharpness from him. He positioned himself slightly in front of me, his voice icy. "President Liu, blocking someone else's wedding convoy, don't you think that's a bit beneath you?" In recent years, the Liu Group's growth had stagnated, while the Shen family had been rising rapidly in emerging economic sectors. Andrew Liu understood that perfectly well, yet he still let out a contemptuous laugh. "President Shen, what kind of woman couldn't you have if you wanted? Why bother picking up what someone else has thrown away?" Daniel Shen calmly adjusted my veil, his tone steady. "President Liu is joking. The woman I'm marrying is the most precious pearl of my life. I should be thanking you for letting go at the right time." Just as Daniel Shen was about to signal his bodyguards, someone stepped forward from behind. My brother swung a roadside warning cone straight at Andrew Liu, every punch carrying years of pent-up restraint. Sophie Sue's face instantly turned paper white. Andrew Liu gritted his teeth and endured several blows, still stubbornly looking at me. "Stella, is this enough? Can you come with me now?" Sophie Sue trembled as she tried to call the police, but Andrew Liu stopped her with a single look. She finally broke down, covering her face as she sobbed, then staggered away. "President Liu, if you keep acting like this, it's only going to get uglier," I said coldly, giving him a detached glance, my voice freezing over. Oh, all these years in the entertainment industry, I had always kept myself clean. Yet because of the title of Andrew Lou's fiancée, I had endured countless rumors and whispers. The ambiguity between him and Sophie Sue was never clarified, never admitted or denied, leaving me adrift in public opinion, exposed to endless attacks. It wasn't until I finally let go that he rushed here to put on this show of deep love. Perhaps he hoped I would be moved, that under the gaze of his former lover, I would shed tears and nod in agreement, leaving behind a few wounds as proof. Unfortunately for him, that so-called depth of feeling had come too late, worth less than scraps. Daniel Shen took my hand and led me into the wedding car. The bodyguards had already surrounded Andrew Liu. Before getting in, Daniel calmly looked back. "President Liu, please take a rest. After the ceremony is over, arrangements will be made to see you out." 3 years after we got married, one day while I was sorting through old belongings, I unexpectedly discovered a wooden box inside a piano bench. Inside were neatly arranged interviews and news articles about me, from the very start of my career up until now. Every article had careful notes written in the margins. Even preferences I had only casually mentioned were marked and starred in detail. I opened to the first page, a yellowed old photograph. I was 5 years old, hugging a stuffed rabbit on a swing. Behind me was a wall of flowering crabapple trees at my grandmother's home in Suzhou. Daniel Shen walked in and, seeing the box in my hands, the tips of his ears immediately flushed red. "Lawyer Shen," I teased, "this file is even more detailed than a case dossier." I laughed and leaned into his arms. Later, he told me that year he was 8, following his grandfather back to Suzhou to visit an old friend. In the courtyard, he met me, a little girl crying her eyes out. He picked crabapple blossoms and wove them into a crown to comfort me, then secretly slipped his pocket watch into my hand. "When you grow up, come find me," he had said. Back then, I clutched the watch tightly, tears still hanging on my lashes, yet nodded solemnly. On the back of the watch was engraved the character Shen, later becoming the token of promise between our two families. In truth, I had never told him that when I turned to leave that year, I once saw spring sunlight filtering through the crabapple branches, falling onto his young yet resolute face, just like many years later, when he stood before the Liu family, helping me handle the annulment and protecting me with every ounce of reason and reputation he had. Just as radiant as that moment. How many signs did you ignore just to protect a story you wanted to believe? Love and Lies story.